What is the seeker and what is the ox? The seeker is basically someone who doesn't know who they are, but it's different than the average person who hasn't necessarily entered the gates, right? There's billions of people on the planet, yet most of them, and I don't know, I can't assess, but it seems like most of them haven't woken up spiritually. They haven't started truly seeking. You can be in religion, but not be truly seeking, right? There's plenty of people who go to the traditional exoteric religions, the more external-oriented religions, and they're not necessarily on the path. They're just doing what they're supposed to do, what they're told to do, what the book says to do. It's just part of their lifestyle. But something happens inside of us at some point where we say, and these are the key words, there's got to be something more. It can't just be physical matter and that's it. It can't just be working, eating, sleeping, rinse and repeat, doing it over and over again. There's a good book on this. Many books actually you encounter in these earlier stages. One, if you haven't read it, is worth reading. Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. It's a really cute, easy read. Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Richard Bach. Jonathan is a seagull, and he does what all the other best educated seagulls do. He flies, he walks around, he eats food. But he said, there's got to be something more. Maybe I could soar higher. Maybe there's something greater. But when he did try to soar higher, he realized he wasn't able to get very far, but he said, I'm not going to give up. And he kept trying. Eventually, he found other beings who knew how to fly like that. Richard Bach also wrote a book called Illusions. And in the beginning of the book, he talks about these clingers that are clinging to the bottom of this great crystal river. And one day, one of the clingers says, there's got to be something more than just clinging to the bottom of this river. And the other clingers say, if you let go, the way you're talking about, if you don't cling to the bottom of the river, that river you worship is going to bash you all over the rocks and destroy you. And the one said, I'm not going to just sit here like that. I am going to let go. And of course, he was bashed over the rocks and had to cling again. But he still said, I'm not giving up. Eventually, he let go. The river lifted him up to heights he never could have experienced before. So the beginning seeker is someone who's basically saying there's got to be something more to everyday life. It's something that starts to change inside of a person where you are seeking, but you don't know where to seek. You just know there's got to be something more. Because we're bound by law of attraction, whether we know it or not, when you start having those inner impulses of maybe there's teachings, maybe there's teachers, maybe there's something, you end up eventually starting to attract these things. So there's books that come to you, teachers come to you, but this could take years of just each stage, usually takes about a year if you start really applying yourself. But this first stage could go on for years and years of feeling some existential angst, and you have no idea what to do with yourself. So those of you who are facilitators, hypnotherapists, or whatever, you might find a client walks in at this stage, all right? We're like, is there something more to life? And the beautiful thing is you'll start to know where to guide others because you realize there is a path. Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversation with God, they interviewed him and they said, what's happened, since you had this amazing dialogue with God? And the first thing he said is, well, I'll never have to worry about money again. He's international best-selling author, but probably deeper than that. He was homeless before that all happened to him, but realizing he's now in alignment with his Dharma, his path, he's like, I'm set, I'm good, I'm on my path. But the reason I mentioned that is when they said, what happened? How's your life changed? He goes, now I know there's a path. Before I didn't know there was a path. I'm not done with the path, but at least I know there is a path and I'm on it. So knowing that, we can guide people into the next stage. So stage one basically is seeking, but not having found yet. If you look, I know the images are small in your manual, but if you look close, you'll see a whip and a rope in the hand of the seeker. They have tools, but they don't know what those tools are for. To jump ahead a little bit, in Sanskrit, in the yogic model, those tools are vivek and vairagya. Vivek is discerning wisdom, the ability to discern the real from the unreal, truth from illusion, ego from spirit. So if you want to meditate on this concept at any time, during the retreat perhaps, just ask, who am I? I'm not this floor, I'm not this ottoman. I'm not this shirt, I'm not these pants. Keep eliminating everything until there's nothing left to eliminate. I'm not these arms, I'm not these legs, I'm not these kidneys, I'm not this heart, not my neck, I'm not my throat, I'm not my emotions, I'm not my mind. All of those are temporary, finite, changing realities. All right, what you're seeking in the beginning here is that which is immortal and eternal, even though you don't know what's immortal and eternal yet. All right, but you know there's got to be something more than these changing forms. So Vivek works with the formula of netsi, netsi. I'm not this, I'm not that. And then you keep going more and more subtle. As we get into Samadhi today, we'll talk about how Samadhi moves from the outside to the inside. Just like hypnosis, we call it a refocusing of attention. I'm going to guide the client or the seeker inwards. Right? So whenever we're doing Samadhi or discerning what we are and what we're not, we're going from the more dense to the most subtle. And what are the most subtle things inside? Your thoughts, your chit vrittis. It's the term in the Yoga Sutras for basically your thoughts, waves of perception. We have ego, we have intellect, we have memories. Ask, am I my memories? Am I my emotions? Am I my intellect? Am I my amness sense, the sense of I? Neti, neti, you would apply to every one of those things. I'm not this, I'm not that. Keep letting all of it go, and then you are discerning what's left and what's the other stuff. The other jewel, the whip and the rope, is called vairagya, or just letting go. Vairagya, letting go. It's often translated as renunciation, but renouncing is quite often going to get rid of things I don't like and I don't want anyway, right? The things I have trouble with. I'm renouncing sex, right? Because you're not okay with it. I'm renouncing relationships. Why? Because you're not okay with it. It's not about you choosing to just get rid of things. Vairagya is when you see something that's moving, let it go. Anything that moves, let it go. If we cling to anything, we suffer. We talked about that yesterday. So the seeker is eventually going to learn those teachings. They have the capacity in them to do this, but they don't know how to do it yet. Okay, so Vivek, discern the real from the unreal. Vairagya, let go of the unreal. If you study A Course in Miracles deeply, you'll see very clearly in the Manual for Teachers stages of spiritual growth, and they talk about a sorting out process there. Sorting out what's true, what's not true. You cling to what's true, you let go of what's not true. That's vairagya. Not pushing it away, not holding on to it, but letting it pass by, because it is going to pass by. Everything is temporary and fleeting, but not you, the observing consciousness. So anyway, stage one is somebody who's longing for something more, maybe in that state of existential angst, but hasn't found it yet. But because of law of attraction, they're bound to pull in what they're looking for. That leads to stage two, finding the footprints. These are the teachings of the great masters. So if you haven't, I think most of you here have, but we're recording. So somebody's listening, and if you haven't done this yet, start studying the great wisdom traditions. So often it starts with, and it did for me, philosophy and or religion, right? What does Judaism say about this? What does Christianity say? What does Islam say? What does Taoism say? What do any of these religions say? If you haven't studied the world religions, right, you don't necessarily know what they're teaching. What does Hinduism say? Zoroastrianism, Jainism, right? Like if you start studying this stuff, you come across what Aldous Huxley referred to as the perennial philosophy. The one underlying philosophy you hear about the most is we're all one. If you get down to what's Judaism really teaching, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Hear, O Yisrael, you could say that's just saying, hey, everybody listen, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Like it's right there in Judaism, a monotheistic view, that there's not just one God, but when you go deeper into the Kabbalistic teachings, there's only oneness. In Hinduism, you might hear about all the different gods and goddesses, but they'll always tell you, no, those are just aspects of the one same reality. Study Taoism, and you hear about the Tao, the one force that's moving all things. In Christianity, we talk about the Trinity model, but in Christian mysticism, there's what's called unio mystica, which is basically your direct experience of the divine. In Islam, there's clearly only one God. Yet if you go into Sufism, they talk about what's called fana al-fila, the complete annihilation of your individual self, so experience your oneness with the divine. Right? So all the teachings, no matter what they're saying on the surface, it starts getting down to we're all one consciousness. We're all one being. So in stage 2, you're studying those teachings. You're finding those teachers. You're following the footprints of the masters. And what they say there is if you're trying to get through a jungle, you're on this side. You suspect there's some goal on the other side. But trying to carve your own path through a jungle would be exhausting, and you probably wouldn't make it through. But the others who have done it before, they have gone that way. So following the footprints of the masters relates back to what I said yesterday, the formula in Buddhism, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Find a teacher, find a set of teachings you can trust, and find a community to practice with. That's always really good advice for somebody in stage 2. All right, that there are others who have done this before. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's also another powerful teaching you often hear at this stage. Don't dig a bunch of small holes trying to find gold. You can learn, okay, I've studied all the religions, I studied all the philosophers, studied mysticism. We start getting deeper with mysticism, but still, if you're trying to practice yoga, Tai Chi, Sufism, all these different traditions, you're just digging smaller holes. The teaching often you hear in stage 2 is dig one really deep hole, which means find your path. It doesn't mean you don't study other paths and learn other paths, but which one are you mastering? Because if you can just dabble a little bit here and there, I was once applying to a monastery, and one of the monks, this is early in my early 20s, I said, I'm a religion major, I'm studying this and this and this and this. He goes, you're like a person with 500 radios tuned to 500 different stations. You're not discerning the one truth because you're hearing too many messages. I took that to heart. I was doing in-depth yogic practice and study and in-depth Tai Chi and Taoist studies, which eventually led to Chinese medicine. But they were saying, you're not going to be able to master both of those. You really have to choose one and get really good at one. So as you can see, I've synthesized a lot of things over the years. But if you're coaching someone, or if you were thinking about maybe you're in stage 2, find a path and go really deep. Stage 3, the first glimpse of the ox. So the ox is actually a little bit tricky to talk about because it's all about who you think you are. In the beginning here, the seeker is looking for something else. However, it's like an eyeball trying to see itself. Right? You're looking for you. They talk about the musk deer running around the forest trying to find the musk, not realizing the musk is emanating off of you. You are what you're looking for, but you don't know that in the beginning. So you say, well, I've got to find the ox. So in the beginning, the ox for the seeker is representing higher truth, mystical reality, the experience of the divine. In the beginning, and this is an illusion, you could say the ox is God or your Buddha nature. But when we say your Buddha nature, you don't have Buddha nature, you are Buddha nature. However, when you're not in touch with it, you're looking for it. The ox, therefore, is something you eventually experience. When I experienced this, January 13th, 1992, when I woke up spiritually, I was 19 years old, and all of a sudden, I talked to you guys about this a little bit, everything just became light, love, joy, peace, oneness, bliss. And I'm like, oh, this is God. I think whatever they mean by the word God, this is it. It was a glimpse, and it'll change your life forever. But the thing that happened for me is the experience went away. Right? It was, okay, I tasted that, but now how do I tap into that more and more? So in this stage, you do start getting glimpses of mystical experience. Maybe you have an out-of-body or near-death experience. Maybe just a profound meditation. But when this happened to me, and I said, I need to know what that was. Nobody ever explained this to me, but I want to live the rest of my life feeling that. When I studied Jainism, a religion out of India, Mahavira, who founded that, was a contemporary of the Buddha around that time. It was called in that religion Samyak Darshan, and that means the soul's first glimpse of itself. And as soon as I saw those words, I'm like, that's what happened. That was the first glimpse of, You could say soul like my soul, but remember, you don't have a soul, you are soul. And that's where talking about the ox is a little tricky, because it seems like we're looking for something else, the ox. However, once you have enough glimpses of this, then the glimpses are interspersed with long periods of darkness, normalcy, right? Human emotion, human life, but not profound mystical experience all the time. But once you've tasted it, you'll never be the same again, and you'll want more and more of it. So when that happens, you start realizing, I'm really looking for this something. Then you have to start asking yourself, what keeps me from that something? In A Course in Miracles, it starts by saying, this is a course on love. And eventually you realize the ox is love. It's a required course, says A Course in Miracles. Eventually you're going to have to return to love. This isn't an option, right? The end result is inevitable. However, the Course says, we cannot teach you what love is. That's beyond what can be taught. We can only help you to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. So the theme is removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. That's when you really start getting into stage 4. Look at stage 4 closely and you'll see the person has the whip and the rope and they're starting to tame the ox. This is where the shift is gradually starting to occur, where you realize the ox isn't actually God or the soul. You are the soul. The ox, therefore, is actually largely your ego. But you could say it's also your body, your emotions, and your mind. Why do I like to link that to body as well? You guys are getting a sense of that during this retreat. Have you noticed how hard it is to meditate and do yoga this much? Right? Barbara said, this is like boot camp, right? How long can you sit this way, right? How flexible is your body? How strong is your body? How healthy is your body? Taming the ox, or actually the stage 4 is catching the ox, is just starting to discipline the human. When you said boot camp, it made me think of Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He said, if you want to be successful in this life, you're going to have to do one of two things. He said, basically, you're going to have to learn discipline. That's the primary idea. He said, but there's two ways you're going to do it. Join the military, as Michelle and I were talking about, or go to a monastery. If you don't have discipline, you won't succeed in this life. So why do we push this hard in kind of a monastic setting? Because your ego doesn't stand a chance. Right? And I'm being gentle, but when I'm like, guys, the schedule, you have, in a monastery, you have to be on the cushion at 1 o'clock, right? This isn't debatable because the ox isn't allowed to do what it wants anymore, right? So you're learning to discipline your body, to have mastery over body. You're learning to, I'm not going to say discipline your emotions and have mastery over the emotions because that would imply controlling emotion, but let's say transforming the blocks in your heart, clearing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And we know in the field of hypnotherapy, where that's what we do. The deep work that we do, we bring up the blockages in the heart, we clear them out. Taming the ox, catching the ox is a big part of that, right? Clear all the hurt and sadness, fear, anger, grief, guilt that you store inside. And then the monkey mind, right? The constantly chattering dialogue in the head, the one that's narrating life when it doesn't need narration, right? There's a tree, there's mountains. I don't need to describe them. I just want to be with them. But the mind can't allow you to just be with reality. Tracy Chapman wrote in one of her songs, she said, there's fiction in the space between you and reality. There's fiction in the space between you and reality. You're not seeing what's there. You're looking through your sanskaric filters, the lens of your own blockages, which means you don't actually see reality because the ox is clouding your vision. A Course in Miracles says, above all else I want to see. Above all else, I want to see things differently. But when you're looking through the veils of your ego, you're only seeing through perception. And the problem with perception is it's always wrong. I see it this way. I see it this way. We're both wrong. In A Course in Miracles, we go from the ego's nightmare to the ego's happy dream to true awakening. And that's what's happening here with the ox. It's a nightmare when you start. Eventually, it's a more tame ox, which goes to stage 5, taming the ox. Eventually, you get your body more disciplined, comfortable, ideally able to sit meditation, right? When the ox just wants to get out and run around? No, we're just sitting, right? Why did the Buddha just sit under the bo tree? He could have done anything else, but he just sat. A Course in Miracles says, I need do nothing. Something you could study if you're not familiar with this is the rainbow body, found largely in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. But Christ's transfiguration could be that phenomena, but that's debatable. But there are definitely Tibetan monks, and these are the men and women, but I largely know of men in this tradition. So I'll say these are the guys who literally spent like 30 years in meditation, mostly just meditating. But if you ask them, what are you doing inside to achieve these very high states? You actually do nothing. If anything, that is contemplate the letter Ah, the sound Ah, the beginning of Om. But like, you're not doing anything. Doing nothing, being still, becomes the solution. Those guys do that for so long. They start vibrating at such a high rate, their body becomes pure light. When the time of, quote, bodily death occurs, all that's left, they cover the body in usually like a cloth or something. And then 7 days later, they come back, there's no more body there. All that's left are fingernails and hair, because that's not living tissue. Everything else dissolves into light. And usually there's a rainbow around the time in the sky and like beautiful mist and this gorgeous smell in the air. Great saints, when they look at their bodies after the time of bodily death, the body isn't decaying. Paramahansa Yogananda, after bodily death, his body smelled of roses or something. You know, they're emanating beauty. So study some of the great saints and sages. Their bodies, like I said earlier, yesterday, become superconductors for divine energy. Okay, so it's called the rainbow body phenomena. And, you know, worth considering, even if we never achieve that in this lifetime, just like doing lotus pose. You may never achieve it, but you're moving towards that in your own practice. So taming the ox basically is when your body, mind, emotions, and your ego sense start to get more disciplined, calm, balanced, aligned, and really to go through stages 4 and 5, catching the ox and taming the ox, you want to do more spiritual practice. And that's what we're doing here, spiritual lifestyle training. I hope this is inspiring you to do. Some of you are asking, how do I do it in the morning? Should I do yoga first or meditation first? Yes. Just do it. Just show up and put more time. Like I said, if you prioritize spirituality, then ask, how many hours a day do I put in the highest, most important thing for me? All right, so to tame and catch the ox, it really requires hours a day of spiritual discipline. If you just watch a YouTube video once, a couple times, go down those conspiracy theory rabbit holes, some people might think that's spirituality because they're just learning about this stuff. But honestly, that's usually more of a stage 2 thing. I'm dabbling in the teachings rather than I'm sitting on a meditation cushion, I'm on the yoga mat, I'm studying the scriptures, I'm doing the real work. Eventually, the ox is going to be quite tame. And once we turn the page to 22, we'll see riding the ox home. Here, the person is no longer needing the whip and the rope. Now they're playing a flute. This is when we can start talking about samadhi, where the experience of deep meditation is becoming real. The stage of samadhi that starts to occur here is called Anand Samadhi. Anand in Sanskrit means bliss, and samadhi basically is oneness. You don't start experiencing continual oneness and bliss as a way of being, not just like a glimpse. Stage 3 was a glimpse. This is, whoa, I'm tapping in every day, right? But again, it can take years to get to these places. When you're there, the body actually wants to sit meditation. It's not discipline. I'm not saying the body actually have a will of its own, but it's not hard to get the body just to sit. The mind, the emotions, it's really going to be the mind. You want to sit meditation. You want to do yoga. You want to study scripture. You want to spend time in solitude and contemplate reality, right? You want to go to these spiritual centers and study with teachers because you know where it's bringing you, and you close your eyes, your inner reality is bliss. But samadhi implies intense, concentrated power. And what are we doing in stage 6? We're largely putting our attention on absolute bliss consciousness regularly. So I want to introduce you today, in case you don't quite know, meditation can be on objects, could be on the breath, could be on the mind, But when we learn to put the attention on spirit, on the absolute bliss consciousness, we have a direct path right to source, right? You don't have to put your attention on the earlier stages of samadhi, which we'll talk about in a moment. You could actually just start focusing on the amness within you, which actually leads more to stage 7. But talking about stage 6, when you start finding bliss in meditation, start putting your attention on the bliss. Whatever technique you are using that gets you there, don't stop the technique just because the bliss is arising, but start transferring your attention from the mantra or whatever you're doing to get to bliss to the bliss itself, because the tools that get you there are not the goal. Buddha said, don't mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon itself. Right? There's the teachings that point to the truth, but then there's the truth. Once you start finding the divine sweetness of that, you put your attention on it more and more. You tend to want to close your eyes more. You tend to just kind of float in and up. Well, the chakras are opening more at this stage. The light is flowing through. You're falling back into bliss relatively easily and wanting to spend hours a day in it. Okay. Now, the goal isn't all about just blissing out, but it's very compelling, right? When you start feeling, whoa, this is working. I've really made progress. So how long does it take to get to this? Yeah, in monastic training, it could be a good 5 to 6 years. How long does it take to go through all the stages? Like I said, about 10 years if you're very serious about the work. But the Zen master was asked, Master, I can't take 10 years. That's so long. He goes, okay, well, then it'll take you 20 years. 20 years? I don't have 20 years. Okay, then it'll take you 30 years. Right, remember, only a fool wasted their next lifetime to do what they could do now. So I hope this motivates the thought about, is enlightenment achievable in this lifetime? Well, the masters say yes, so let's trust them, believe them, and put more effort into it. So we call it right effort, or the term here is sadhana, spiritual discipline, spiritual practice. Stage 7, ox forgotten self alone. This is where the individual sense of self drops away in meditation, and it's the state of samadhi known as asmita samadhi. There's still a little bit of sense of, okay, here I am, but mostly the attention is on the self with a capital S, the absolute bliss consciousness. Not so much the bliss, now you're focused more on consciousness. Asmita samadhi is putting your attention on consciousness itself. Once you realize you're the eyeball, but you've been looking everywhere for yourself, now we talk about turning the light around. Put your attention on, the eyeball would put its attention on itself, but you're not an eyeball. So go a little bit deeper, and there's the conscious observer. Turn your awareness around. In Sanskrit, the externally oriented consciousness is called Vyutan Vritti. I'm looking out here. We're doing it right now, right? You're focused outwards. When we meditate and close our eyes, you practice what's called Nirod Vritti. Turn it inwards and merge back into consciousness. Nirod Vritti implies your mind will settle down, the vrittis, because you've transcended the mind. While you're still trying to stop your mind, listening to your mind, caught up in your mind, working with your mind, you haven't transcended it yet. In stage 7, you're really learning to put your attention on the absolute transcendent reality above your conscious mind. Again, your mind will settle because you got out of it. Instead of splashing around in the pond, get out of the pond and all the waves and the dust will settle on their own. You're just sitting on the bridge or on the shore watching the lower self. All right, so here, when we start, the ox is our higher self. We're trying to get to it. Eventually, you realize you are the higher self, and you have a lower self, body, mind, emotions. When the body, mind, emotions are tame, we've tamed the ox. When the ox isn't giving us any more issue, we can forget it. We can transcend it. We can go beyond it, putting the attention into source consciousness. All that's left in deep mystical experience in that state, when you're experiencing oneness with the divine, is basically, whether you use the words or not, is I love you, an I-thou relationship. I am loving my source. And like I think I said yesterday, You love God whether you know it or not. Because if I said, do you love peace? Yes. Do you love love? Yes. Do you love the feeling of bliss? Yes. Then you love God, right? That's that essence. So yeah, if like, I don't believe in God. Do you believe in love? Yeah, there's something called love. Do you love love? Yes. You love God. Actually, Zig Ziglar, famous sales public speaker, he told this story about a trucking company that did a polygraph on every single new potential employee. And this was like 100,000 people over many years. And one question of all the questions was asked was, do you believe in God? The lie detector said, everybody who said they believe in God, it said they were telling the truth. If it said, they said, I don't believe in God, it showed they were lying. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. If you believe in God, and that's just a word, right? But if you're not your own creator, part of you knows that. Deep inside, you know, I didn't create myself. It's the insanity of the ego to think you are your own creator. But in every deep religious tradition that honors the divine and atheistic model, says that beingness created you as a reflection of that. So here in this state of asmita samadhi, you're experiencing your source, and you want to experience it more and more and more. So the image of maybe a monk here in stage 7 sitting in a mountaintop is very apropos, right? Why did we come into the mountains to do this instead of in a big, busy city? Get to the places. Lewis and I were talking yesterday about the value of silence, right? Like, God, it's just so quiet, right? The spirit is very quiet, right? The mind is so verbose, and people like people who are like themselves, right? I want to talk to people who are ecstatic too. But spirit is the most calm, right? Pure peace. You want to start enjoying that more and more. You become a devotee of it, actually. Stage 7 definitely could be a lot of devotion. You're falling in love with your source. But it depends on your temperament, how you approach it. Stage 8, oxen self-forgotten. Here we're talking about a state called nirvikalp samadhi. Vikalp means imagination. Nir means without. We'll look at it on the next page in a moment. Nirvikalp, without imagination. Not imagining anything. I'm not picturing the past or the future. I'm not picturing my home or the mountains. I'm not picturing my body, emotions, or mind. The most subtle imagination is I exist, right? You have this idea in your head that, hey, here I am. In stage 8, even that pops. What's left there? No words, only non-dualistic experience. But you could say this is the top of the mountain. This is oneness with God, the merging into the transcendent absolute, unio mystica, or in Sufism, fana al-fila, where the individual self is just annihilated. A good word you could consider in meditation is just obliterate me. And if you just say, just let the ocean in. Imagine I'm trying to keep this great force out. Just like, all right, I'm opening the windows. I'm just going to let go and let God rush in. Love doesn't wait upon time. It waits upon invitation. So one night in meditation, one of my students, she was talking about like her emotion. She's like, I just feel like I'm getting obliterated. I'm like, that's actually a really good word spiritually. So that night in meditation, I'm like, obliterate. Sounds like Harry, is it Harry Potter? Like a spell? Obliterate. Obliterate the ego. So literally, if you really mean that, you can feel the energy of the universe just pours into your whole being, and there's just no more individual self left. That's very much what's happening in this state of nirvikalpa samadhi. Your individuality, the bubble that is you, just pops, and as Rumi said, becomes 100 mighty seas. That's the top of the mountain. You can't really talk about it. The Tao Te Ching says, those who speak do not know, those who know do not speak. So you can't really say what the experience of God beyond the beyond is. That's why we use words like beyond the beyond. However, you can absolutely experience this. Once you reach the top, and that can happen actually out of your body as well, but for the sake of time, we won't go into it. Doesn't matter if you're experiencing a body or not, but in nirvikalpa samadhi, when you're out of body, the entire physical universe drops away, and you as soul merge into source. But again, that's something we don't have too much time to talk about now. However you reach the top, it's always the same destination, and you'll always have to come back down again. So in Anahat speak, the ascending triangle represents what we just talked about, the top of the mountain, oneness with God. Stage 9 begins the descent. And you'll notice here in the picture, there's mountains, rivers, trees, but no individual person. But remember, these pictures imply identity. Who do you think you are? You're all of it. Once you realize you're the underlying consciousness of all things, you know, and maybe you could just sense it right now, the same consciousness coming out this way is the same consciousness perceiving. Right? Meaning you and I are the same exact being. There's one ocean of consciousness. It's localized in each of these bodies, but it's still the same being. When you realize we're all the same being, you're moving more into stage 9. The Samadhi stages here relate to words like Kevalya Avastha, oneness with the whole. Not oneness with source, but oneness with the whole. Right? You realize you're all of it. This state is called Asampragyat Samadhi, which means no subject, no object, no duality. Remember, I said in the beginning of our retreat, a very important principle in Zen is don't be dualistic. Right? Don't say that form is form and emptiness is emptiness. In Zen, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Right? We say in the beginning of the path that first trees are trees, mountains are mountains. When you get far enough, trees are not trees, mountains are not mountains. Nothing is what it appears to be. But in stage 9, trees are trees, mountains are mountains. However, there's something very different. There's no individual ego feeling separate from that. When you're in stage 9 long enough and you're feeling, whoa, I'm the earth, I'm the mountains, I'm the trees, I'm the sky, I'm all of it, I'm people, I'm animals, I'm children, you can't avoid seeing the suffering that's there. And that's what starts leading to stage 10. So after enough time enjoying these stages, kind of quote, for yourself, you realize you don't exist for yourself. You exist as part of the whole, and you are the whole. Therefore, whenever there's suffering, all you want to do is give away what you have. You see somebody who's in a state of avidya or ignorance of their true self, and you know the solution, and all you want to do is give. So, of course, the miracle says, to have, give all to all. To have, give all to all. What would that mean if you come down from the top of the mountain here and enter the marketplace with helping hands? That's stage 10. Right? So as you realize who you are, you might ask 2 deep questions in meditation. 1, who am I? 2, who am I going to be when I grow up? Or I own a career school, right? So I like to say to my students who are adults, who are you going to be when you grow up? Who am I and what is my purpose? Who am I and how can I be of service? Who am I and what am I meant to truly do here? Once you have those 2 answers, there's certainty. Right? The ego is uncertain, but the outcome is not unknown to God. And when you're one with that, you know your path. You might not be done with the path, as Neil Donald Walsh said, but at least you know you're on the path. Stages of samadhi, and there are stages, it's not just one state. There's described in the Yoga Sutras and the classical yogic tradition, but I largely, living in India, took a very deep dive, studying Sanskrit, studying with real great masters in the Himalayas, learning the Yoga Sutras, and they very clearly outline these stages. Savikalp, and the pa, the extra a, isn't quite how you pronounce it in Sanskrit, so Savikalp Samadhi, with seed or with distinctions, but again the word vikalp means imagination. So here, when we're talking about the first stage, so in Savikalp we have what's called Savitark and Nirvitark. There's different ways to kind of map this out in a chart to show the differentiations, but within Savikalp, which means with imagination, we have Savitark and Nirvitark. So what does that mean? When you're meditating with eyes open, if you were to look at anything, here's a water bottle. If I put my attention right on the water bottle, with you guys in the back, if you do it now, if I look at this, my consciousness is with it, but Savitark means I'm using my thoughts. Savitark, with imagination. You're not actually seeing the water bottle there. You're seeing it in your brain and in your mind, right? You're not actually seeing what's there. You know that, right? The light is coming into your eyes, it's flipped over, your brain reflips it over, and then you're seeing it on the screen of your mind. You don't actually see what's there. You're only seeing it with imagination, but Savitark means you're using words to describe it, basically. It's black on the top, it's gray on the bottom, it's rounded, it says Adirondack on it. I see the valve. I'm being with it, but with a lot of mind. Nirvitark means there's no mind, no fiction in the space between you and reality. Think about how valuable that is. Again, being with a partner, being with another person, and all you're doing is thinking about the experience. Let go of the thinking and just be one with that person. So nirvitark here means I'm one with the object of consciousness without my mind getting in the way. It's the deepest way to know something or someone. Beyond that, savachar and nirvichar, it's still in the savikalp category, meaning there's still imagination there. But when we get to savachar, we tend to close our eyes and we visualize something. So, Lewis, you were talking about the life between life stuff. That's in the realm of savachar, where you're seeing imagery. And Lewis was saying, when you explore the stations of the soul, all the different things that happen after bodily death, when we do past life regression and life between life regression, even if it's memories, it's probably a lot of make-believe as well, or a combination of both, confabulated, but they are images. But eventually, they lead beyond the images. So they can be valuable, but we don't want to think the imagery is actually the goal. It's fun, it's exciting, it keeps you engaged. Samadhi can be kind of boring for a beginner because you're not focusing on anything but consciousness, really. So savachar implies usually eyes are closed, you're imagining things. Now, what would you be imagining when you're doing samadhi? One specific thing. It could be your mantra you're using, the breathing and the counting. Picture, like if you were picturing, let's say this was a statue of Buddha. I wish I brought my Buddha statue. If there was a statue of Buddha here, Savatark is we're looking at it and describing it. Wow, Buddha's beautiful. He has a wonderful smile. He's describing it. Nirvichar, the mind is clear, and we're just looking at the statue of Buddha. Now when we close our eyes, we picture the statue of Buddha. That's when we get to savachar. And you're going to think about it. Okay, I see the image of Buddha. I can see him sitting in lotus. I can picture him under the bo tree. But when it gets to nirvichar, it's just your consciousness is observing the image with nothing in between. Okay, so what we're going to do in samadhi is at first, in these stages, there's an object of consciousness, either physical or internal, and there's a you who's observing it. If you keep doing the practice long enough where you get to your mind being very quiet and all you're seeing is the face of Christ, if you're visualizing that, or the image of Buddha, or a picture of Krishna, or just your one mantra, right? You've said Nichiren Buddhism, so Namaho Rengekyo. If that's all you're doing, there's nothing between you and the mantra, right? When that's happening, only mantra, nothing else in your mind. If you're saying the mantra out loud, it's in the vitark category. If you say it internally, it's in the vichar category. We're going deeper within. So if you chant the mantra out loud, good, because you'll narrow your field of attention to the moment. But then direct it inwards and start hearing the mantra in your head. When there's no other thoughts, you're moving into nirvichar. But now the bliss will start to arise, and that's what leads to a non-samadhi. Don't stop the mantra, whatever you were doing at that point, as a bliss arises, because you're like, oh, wow, that feels so good. You'll drift off into sleep, or what we call yoga nidra. To move beyond yoga nidra into samadhi, we have to stay supremely conscious. And when we go practice meditation, we'll have you lying down on the floor in a few minutes. Practice the intense concentration so you don't fall asleep, right? That's what keeps you awake. As the bliss and it starts feeling so pleasant and peaceful and wonderful, keep the practice going. But keep the mantra going and transfer your consciousness more to the bliss. Yeah, the mantra's happening, but I'm moving into the bliss. Keep the mantra going. That's a non-samadhi. When you're feeling bliss and you start putting your attention on bliss, feeling one with bliss. Beyond that is asmita samadhi. The attention is on amness, on pure consciousness, on the eyeball itself, but deeper than the eyeball, right? The knower itself, the consciousness, the witness, the observer. The most direct path, if you want to skip all that, you're like, this is all complicated. Do I need to know all this? Not at all. My teacher in India Swami Sham, he said, close the eyes, put the attention on the self. I studied religion in the States for years. I mean, as you can tell, it's my whole life. And I go to India, I'm like, oh my God, this is so remarkably simple. Close the eyes, put the attention on the self. That's all you have to do. So can you learn this, study it? Yeah, what else are you going to talk about? I was asking Michael Singer at Temple Universe when I was like in my 20s many years ago. He said, the path of yoga transcends all philosophy and religion. I'm a philosophy and religion major. So I said, well, why is your temple so full of all these saints and sages and, religious imagery? He said, if you weren't thinking about that, what else would you be thinking about? If you weren't thinking about the divine, what else would you be thinking about? So if you're going to focus on something, we say focus on spiritual things. But things are not really spiritual necessarily. They come and go. What's spiritual? You, because you're a spirit. Turn the light around. Just put your attention on pure consciousness. In Anahat meditation, we do descending often in the morning. So we're sitting here with eyes open. You can still be aware of the consciousness, but at night or in the afternoon when you close your eyes, like we'll do soon, just put your attention on your conscious awareness, the I am presence. You've skipped every stage of samadhi and just make the object of consciousness pure consciousness itself. You turn the light around. The other stages I won't really go into now, we touched upon them, is Nirvikalp. Nirvikalp, again, is relating to stage 8. The mind is clear. You're feeling one with source, non-dualistic. On page 24, wrapping it up, Dharma Megha Samadhi, and remember I was taking you through the cloud of unknowing, which we'll do again. They call this the cloud of Dharma, or the final stage. Even the most subtle impressions, sanskars, dissolve. There's no more blockages in that state. Freedom from karma. There's no more cause and effect because you're one with source. There's no time because you've transcended it. You're beyond conditioning. Spontaneous wisdom and virtue arise without effort. Liberation, or the term there is kevalya or kevalya avastha. It's the stage 9, oneness with the whole. And awareness is resting in its own nature, which is one with all that is. That moves into a stage there, I don't have the word here, but it's called Sahaj Samadhi. After you spend enough time in it, and I've been encouraging that during the retreat, when we get off the cushion, we walk. You take the meditation off the cushion. Sahaj Samadhi is this natural effortlessness where you're still just doing what anybody else does, right? Walking, talking, eating, sleeping, but you're in that state. It's not only on the cushion anymore. It's with you all the time. So you could basically say Sahaj Samadhi is you're naturally just one with God all the time. And when you're around these great saints, like when I met Swami Sham in India and I gave him the hug for the first time, I'm like, this is like hugging pure light. This is like hugging pure love. There's nothing there. There's a body, but it's like light body. Lahiri Mahasai from the Self-Realization Fellowship, they always tried to take his picture, but when they did, there was only light there on the film. Everybody else was there, but he was an orb of light. And they said, why can't we take your picture? He said, you can't photograph pure light. He said, but I'll densify my bodily atoms so you could have a picture of me because I know you want that. Right? Again, rainbow body. And Christ's transfiguration was most likely that stage. So how do we get to those highest stages? Do nothing. But how often do you just literally sit and do nothing? What the stage 10 of the ox herding picture says is, in that stage, when you're functioning at that level, without recourse to mystic powers, withered trees he quickly brings to bloom. You're not even trying and people are just healed around you. Somebody comes into your life, they're blessed just because you're only blessing others in that stage. Wrapping it up here, in A Course in Miracles, your only function is to forgive. But then, what happens when you've forgiven everything? If you forgive everything, but your function is to forgive, listen to the word, forgive. What is your purpose? For giving, to have, give all to all. So these final stages, you're a blessing to all beings, all sentient beings, not just human beings, right? Because you are the light acting, living in the world.